So we're talking about the top 10 Dolby Atmos spatial audio mixes that you can stream, whether it's on Apple Music or Tidal, or I think Amazon also has Atmos Music or spatial audio.
All right, so kicking off the list for the best Atmos music on Apple TV or on Tidal, coming in at number 10 is, I do believe,
So by the way, when you say best, it doesn't necessarily mean the best content, but I just think that these are really good mixes. I'm a big Harry Connick Jr. fan. The guy is he's amazing. Like, he's a virtuoso in every instrument he plays. He's got a great voice. He's really a funny actor. I mean, everything about the guy is just awesome. I accidentally found this song because I don't think the whole album is in Atmos. So some of the choices I put on my list are just one songs, or some of them are albums. But in this case, I don't think there's a full album. But if you're a Harry Connick fan, check this one out. It's it's not gimmicky. Some of the Atmos mixes that I've been listening to on Apple Music, either there's not enough center channel dialogue, so you can't really hear them singing, or they crank the bass levels up 10 dB and it's just like a bass fest. Or they throw the lyrics in the back of the room, which is very unnatural unless you have someone actually panning around the room for a reason. But this is a good mix, and it's a good song, and Harry Connick's got a great voice, and if you like him, listen to it in Atmos. I think you'll like it.
It Had to Be You.
I saw him live at Ruth Acker, and he went for 3 hours straight, didn't even take a drink of water. He was singing, playing piano, playing the trumpet. I couldn't believe it. The guy never took a break, man. Just unbelievable.
He's the new Frank Sinatra of our age.
Yeah, he really is.
Coming in at number 10. Coming in at number 9.
So I couldn't find the whole album for Queen, but I did find another one, Bites the Dust. It's on the rock playlist for spatial audio. This is really impressive. Like, it kind of boggles your mind how they took these old recordings and brought new life to them in Atmos. This one comes off really well. It's not gimmicky. It's a classic song. Obviously, I don't need to tell people how good some of the Queen's music is. But this is a good Atmos mix. The bass is good. Vocals are really strong from the center channel, Freddie Mercury. And there's a lot of spaciousness. And there's a lot of stuff going on to the sides and above you. I mean, it's fun to listen to. I know if you ever want to give a demo to people, they're going to want to hear Queen, or they're going to want to hear the Beatles. This is definitely a track you'd want to play for them.
Is there a standout track on this album?
I don't think they have the whole album in Atmos. This is just a song. Another one, Bites the Dust.
Oh, got you. And this is on Apple or Tidal?
Everything on the list is on Apple except for the Steven Wilson one. I couldn't find it on Apple. That one's only on Tidal for some reason, even though they have the 2-channel versions.
Spoiler alert. Okay. So that's number 9.
Yeah.
Coming in at number 8 is
Porcupine Tree Harridan. Harridan? I don't know if I even say that right. It means an old woman, like that's just kind of a hag. So this is the first song from Porcupine Tree in about probably 8 or 9 years, maybe 10 years, because they broke up. Steven Wilson has his own solo stuff, so they got back together. They are releasing an album next year. They're doing a tour next year. I've got Gavin Harrison coming on our channel January 13th, one of the best drummers in our time. He's going to be on Audioholics, so stay tuned for that. He's one of my drum heroes. This track just kicks ass, man. If you're a Porcupine Tree fan, you've never heard Porcupine Tree in Atmos before, not native. Most of their recordings are in 5.1 DTS HD, and you can upmix them to Atmos or DTS or whatever upmixer you like to use. This is the first time I've ever heard Porcupine Tree in Atmos. Great track. I love the beginning of it. There's like this really awesome bass riff playing, and then all of a sudden the guitars just hit, and they hit all around you. The bass is great. Gavin Harrison, man, on drums is just, I don't know how the guy does it. He's in like 5 different bands. He's in Pineapple Thief. He's in King Crimson. He's in Porcupine Tree. He's done so much stuff, and it's a great first track for a new album, so I have high hopes that it's going to be good. But definitely check this out if you're a Porcupine Tree fan. Even if you're not a Porcupine Tree fan, if you're just a hard rocker fan and you want to hear a good Atmos mix, well done.
Coming in at number 7 is the Beatles.
So, I am a huge Beatles fan. Of course, everybody's probably been overloaded with listening to the Beatles since they grew up. But David Frangione, who's a friend of our channel, has kept telling me you need to go listen to the Beatles tracks on Apple Music. They are quite remarkable, and he was right. Sgt. Pepper's is just unbelievable. I went to the Circus Soleil show back in 2007, and that's when they released the Love album, which was in DVD audio 5.1. So I got to hear it in 5.1 with the speakers in the seats at Circus Soleil. I got to hear it at my house and compare it, and it was unbelievable production what George Martin did, bringing these recordings back to life, extracting stuff. Nothing was new added. These are all samples that the Beatles recorded, all these different instruments that they recorded, all the different sound effects they recorded. They took the analog masters and they brought it back into these tracks because they couldn't do all this back in the day. We didn't even have quadraphonic when the Beatles were releasing their records. So they finally had the production capability to bring all of the stuff that they recorded into these tracks. And man, when you hear this in Atmos, it's like it was recorded yesterday. Like you don't think that this stuff was recorded in the late 60s. And it's well done too. I mean, it's just beautiful. I mean, if you're a Beatles fan, you grew up with the Beatles, it'll bring a tear to your eye. And Sgt. Pepper's is arguably one of their best albums. So to hear that whole album in Atmos is a real treat.
Coming in at number 6 is...
There you go. Yeah, more Beatles. So they have 2 albums in Atmos, and I would say they're equally as good. It just really depends on what your favorite album is from them. Check them all out. And if you go into, they don't categorize the spatial audio very well. So if you go look up the Beatles, because you can't always find this in the spatial audio section, go look up the Beatles, look up these albums. You should be able to find the Atmos version of them first. But if for some reason you pick up the 2-channel version, go back into the menus and look for another occurrence of that album, and you'll find the Atmos.
Coming in at number 5 is Coldplay.
Let me tell you something, man. Coldplay always, to me, when I first heard Coldplay, I always thought they were kind of a cheap knockoff of U2. And then I started digging them. I saw the movie Wedding Crashers, and they had one of their songs in there, and I really started getting into their music. And then I kind of forgot about them for a while. Then they were on Howard Stern's show, and they played the new song Coloratura, and it's like a 10-minute music-gasm. I mean, it's so good. Like, it's the song that Bill and Ted should have written to unite the world for world peace.
Oh, boy.
The music is that profound. The lyrics are that profound. And the entire album is really a masterpiece. I think it's the best work Coldplay has ever done. And you could tell that this thing was actually recorded for Atmos. So if you have a chance and you want to sit down one night, put the entire album on from start to finish. Don't skip any songs. Just listen to it. It's a very fluid album. It's almost progressive rock in nature just because it's not commercialized. I mean, some of the songs on there are just, you'll never hear them on the radio. You'll never hear them on top 10 or anything like that. But Coloratura is just a sonic treat, man. I really love that song. And the Atmos mix is tastefully done. Chris Martin's voice is very easy to hear from the center channel. The bass isn't goosed up. Bass is really good. And the immersive effect is awesome.
So this album was meant for Atmos?
Definitely, yeah.
And that translates well for a 2-channel.
Yeah, I mean, I listen to the 2-channel version as well in my on my headphones or in my car or whatever. But man, it's in Atmos. It's like a real treat. It really. I mean, if anything, I might even put this as number 1 just because it's new music and it's purposely designed for Atmos.
Guess I'll have to check that one out. Coming in at number 4 is Point Yello.
I guess a lot of people may not know who Yello is, but if you ever watch Ferris Bueller's Day Off, they're the ones that did that song. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
Yeah. So this is a really good mix, but my only complaint about it is they have the bass levels way too high. I mean, there was I forgot what song on here on this album, but the bass was so deep, it was below 20 hertz, and it was shaking. It was actually shaking my image on my screen. Like my projector must have been resonating the lens or something like that. And I was like, man, that is crazy. But the bass is a little high, but the mix is awesome. I mean, there's shit happening all around you. And it's one of those albums, again, that are meant for Atmos.
Let's move on over to number 3, Billie Eilish.
Billie Eilish. So she's one of those, like, she's so oversaturated in the market, and I can't watch any news stories about her. But you know what? Give her credit, and her brother Phineas, I think his name is.
Ferb?
The production quality of her music and what her brother does with the mixes is like second to none, man. I mean, this entire album, it's actually a good album. I mean, considering how commercially successful she is, it's actually a really good album. She's got her first album, I think, that's in Atmos. I think all three of them might be in Atmos, but I really like this one. This one's a little bit more substantive than the other two. The bass is really deep and tight. It's not really that overdone, but the mixes are awesome. It's just one of those things. If people don't understand what spatial audio is, they will if they listen to an album like this or the other two that I showed you before. This is definitely demo material, and it's actually enjoyable music. Most of the album's really good. And she did, someone just mentioned her Bond theme. They didn't like her James Bond theme. I thought her James Bond song was good. That's also in Atmos. Sounds really good as well. So yeah, I know there's a big audiophile following for Billie Eilish, and people buy her stuff on vinyl. But come on, man, I like vinyl too, but there's no comparison going from vinyl to this in Atmos. It's surreal.
Oof. So you feel like this was made for Atmos then?
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. I'll have to watch this. I've listened to it several times on stereo, but not Atmos.
It really does sound good. Yeah.
Coming in at number 2 is The Weeknd.
The Weeknd is my daughter is obsessed with The Weeknd. That's her Michael Jackson of today. You know, I mean, I wasn't even a Weeknd fan until she started playing me certain songs from him, and I'm like, you know what, he is pretty good. Like my favorite from him, I think, is Afterlife, and After Hours or something like that. I don't even remember the name of the song. It's one of the long songs. But the production quality on both of his albums, because I put 2 of them in here, are just unbelievable. I mean, he didn't goose the bass up like on the Post Malone Atmos tracks that I was playing. The bass is way too high on those, and you could barely hear the vocals. I didn't like the way they mixed Post Malone. Plus, the lyrics were coming from behind. The Weeknd or whoever did The Weeknd's production, used the Atmos for spatiality. So you still hear the vocals dead center. You could still hear his vocals very clearly. And it's just a really good mix. Like the production of his music is excellent.
Which brings us to number 1. Also, The Weeknd.
I think that's his most popular album. Yeah, that's a killer one. I mean, it's very playable. There's a lot of good songs on there. I was shocked because I just expected, because it's pop, that it was going to be over compressed and it wasn't going to sound good, and I was wrong. I mean, like, these albums are just incredibly well done for Atmos.
Do you know how much flack I get for listening to pop music and stuff like this when I do a 2-channel review? Because it's not some esoteric band. They're like, you can't listen to pop music because it's no good.
I mean, there are some great pop recordings. Michael Jackson's Thriller is one of the best pop recordings of all time. I mean, that's Quincy Jones, I think, produced that album, and that's from like 84 or 83. That still holds up as being a really well-recorded album. Steely Dan, Donald Fagen, Nightfly, those are all pop albums. A little jazz to them, but they're well-produced. Billie Eilish, again, her stuff it sounds really good. And it's pop. So I like all sorts of music, man. I listen to jazz. I listen to, Pat Metheny. I listen to hard rock. I'll even throw in some Metallica here or there. But Metallica sounds horrible. It's just not produced well. My favorite band is Genesis, and their stuff sounds pretty bad especially on CD. Some of their stuff in 5.1 is okay. It's just really bright. So a lot of the recordings from the 70s and 80s just, you know, they don't translate well digitally. That's why I still spin records, man. I've got some vinyl behind me right here.
It's almost kind of like when you watch old movies that have been transferred over to 4K.
Mm,
Maybe like Ghostbusters that was like recorded in stereo. They try to
yeah,
put an Atmos mix on it. It sounds dated, and they
yeah.
try to like spread the effects around to make it more spacious, more discreet. But it just doesn't work because the effects sound like they were recorded back in '84.
And what happens on the Atmos music, and I'm not trying to paint rosy pictures about how great spatial audio always is. There's a lot of bad recordings. I mean, I listen
Mm.
to one of my favorite bands is Rush, put on Subdivisions or no, Tom Sawyer. I put on Tom Sawyer. It sounded horrible in Atmos. They just did not do a good job. But it's probably not their fault either because Rush is another band that just didn't have high quality in their production, in the recordings. And it just does not translate well to Atmos.
And let's go over to your honorable mention.
Steven Wilson, yeah, he's the front man for Porcupine Tree. He's been doing a lot of solo work. Here's the weird thing about this album. This is his pop album, and he got a lot of flack for it because he was traditionally a progressive rock guy. This album is very poppy. He even has Elton John on one of his songs on I forget the name of the song now. Personal Shopper is Elton John in the background is the one that's calling out all the different items he's singing about. So sounds great in Atmos. The only problem is if you go on Apple Music, you can't find it in Atmos. You have to go to Tidal, and Tidal still doesn't have their levels worked out right. So if you're listening to Atmos on Apple Music and you switch over to Tidal, you got to crank it up another 10 dB to get it at the same level. And if you forget that you cranked it up and you go back, or especially if you're listening to 2 channel, they're going to get blown out of the water. But Future Bytes, it's not his best work, but it is really a pleasure to listen to in Atmos. And it's the first album that Steven Wilson has ever done in Atmos. In fact, I had him on our channel a couple of years ago, and we were talking about Atmos. He didn't even know what Atmos was. And he was like skeptical that anybody would ever have more than 5 speakers in their house with a subwoofer. Well, here we are years later, and now he's mixing music in Atmos, and now Apple Music has kind of taken over and the Gen Zers are embracing spatial audio. There's an article on our homepage right now that Dolby did a whole survey, and it's promising. I mean, people really are getting this spatial audio stuff, whether it's for headphones or if it's in a home environment and you have at least 2 height speakers, you can enjoy the spatial audio.